we're wrapping up Terror in Resonance from Studio MAPPA and is streaming on Funimation and Hulu. And this was one of the Noi Tamina shows of the season, and certainly a very anticipated series from MAPPA, obviously, and also Shinichiro Watanabe. And Yoko Kanno did the music, so it was a nice reunion of sorts. And it was an original story.
Unlike Kids in the Slope. I think I had a very provocative first episode, and so...
And just in general, it was really dealing with these kids who are terrorists. They are the protagonists of the series, I guess you could say, so.
As much as I complain about not kind of being interconnected with the Annie Twitter universe every once in a while, this was one of the few shows that I did see, even in my limited time on, I did see discussion of this show every week. Even Space Dandy, which I was a little shocked I had seen a lot of talk dry off on. This show, I feel like every week I saw like a little discussion of.
I think that the series was really able to maintain that sense of tension all the way through. Although I think the last episode had some not as much tension, but all the way up through 10, I think it really had you kind of on the edge, very unsure of how things were going to turn out. There are all of these bombs that 9 and 12 are planting throughout the city, and then once this other character 5 shows up, who's kind of their former, I don't want to say colleague because that doesn't make sense, but was in the same program as them, and she is trying to stop them, but she's also crazy. I feel like there was just a lot of kind of like a thriller, because you just didn't know, was this plane going to explode and kill like all of these people? And I felt like it did a really good job of hanging on to you in that way.
So don't forget to bring it up later. Do you think that in part they broke a lot of the tension in the last episode, so certain things that happened near the end would be a little more impactful? Kind of like a twist, because if they had come during a thing of tension, they would have been a little more expected or a little more part of the standard program. But since they had that kind of period of peace for a second, I feel like when the floor drops, it's a lot more impactful. I wonder if that was Watanabe's general thinking there.
I can see what you mean. I think maybe I need to rewatch it and sort of with that kind of in mind. I mean, I was definitely intrigued the whole time, and it does bring up one of the things that I feel it comes up a lot in fiction, dealing with terrorists and revolutionaries, and I didn't bring this up when we talked about the first episode, I even talked to Al about it afterwards, was that in the first episode, 9 and 12 make sure that the building is empty. They set off all the alarms and empty the building before detonating their bomb. And so I kind of wondered how that was going to play into this. And it comes up all the way like through this series, and then it's brought up very specifically by the detective Shibazaki at the end that they obviously had some greater message, because their intention didn't seem to be to actually hurt people. It was to get attention.
I do kind of feel like certain people felt like that got a little bit of teeth out of the message. But I wonder how much it would have been a very harder show to swallow. I mean, definitely certain people would have stuck with it and would have really resonated. But especially considering how much terrorism is still really painful for both the United States and Japan.
And it's still a current event. I mean, it's happening every day or every week.
I wonder how much they wanted you to at least be semi-sympathetic to the main characters, which would have really been a lot harder had they been, just slaughtering people left and right. Yeah, it would have been a lot trickier. It would have been a lot more difficult balance. And I feel like even as it was, this isn't the easiest sell.
No, it's very gray. As a lot of fiction is able to do, they make you sympathize with the villain. I mean, that's kind of even one of the things that people even like about anime is that a lot of times you really like the villain, or, there's something about them that you understand. You're dealing with a childhood trauma and government conspiracy and cover-ups and things like that. So I don't think that you dislike Shibazaki. Like, he's an awesome detective, and he is really key to the show. I mean, it would be different without him. Even though he is after them, he starts to sort of understand them too. I think in a way that kind of disturbs him a little bit, like that he gets it. I liked that they were playing with that a little bit, and that he's kind of defying his orders in the police to not help them, but to kind of better understand them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's totally a great idea. This type of a story, I feel like, doesn't really exist. Like people who plant bombs, blow up people, and like that. I mean, you know, it's a very fictional type of tale, and I think that's why I feel almost like okay about sympathizing with them. Like you said, Al, I don't think I could otherwise.
I feel like certain people are going to be disappointed in that, but I feel like that would have made this like a pitch black show. It would have really been a very different show, and it would have been a really hard sell.
Although the final bomb, that could have hurt people because there was like all those planes in the air that had to land.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the one that they had less control over because it was such a wide area that people could and probably were injured, because also just that the magnitude of what had happened, there's no way that people weren't hurt by stuff that happened. I mean, indirectly, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's no way that there were not, like, deaths or injuries after that.
Yeah. It didn't make them blameless, and that's important in the story, that they weren't like the nicest nice guys, that they did have, you know, some edge to them, that they did have something to it. I feel like there was a certain segment of people who wanted it to be darker, and I don't feel either choice was wrong. I just feel like whichever one you choose, you're basically very much changing how the show works and how it interacts with its audience. One quick thing I want to mention was that it's very easy to take away an anti-American, or at least, you know, very critical of American policies attitude from it.
We have it coming, believe me.
But I think it's also really worth noting that it seems really critical of the growing militarism in especially extremely conservative Japanese society. I mean, I know that there's a really growing voice to get rid of Article 9 and kind of rebuild the Japanese military. Not that that was ever not a voice, but it seems really a lot more close to being actualized than it has been before. And I feel like when you find out who was behind the project and who's kind of behind everything, especially when you see it's a lot of these old guard, really ultra-conservative guys who are still really sore over losing World War II and really sore about not having a full military. Equally damning of that kind of faction of, we don't need America anymore and we've got to be a world power, a military world power again. It equally takes that to task.
I do wonder how Shibazaki fits into that. He's a cop, he is a detective, but he kind of defies his orders, and I feel like in American movies, like, that is like the status quo. Do cops ever like follow orders in American movies and television? I'm gonna go with no. But I feel like him being defiant of his commanding, like kind of the bureaucracy of the police. I don't know. I'm not sure, you know, how that fits in. Is that criticism, or is that, well, you know, but he's not like a loose cannon or something.
But the thing that destroyed his career was looking into the dirty affairs of this conservative old guard. And when they told him, like, don't look into this suicide anymore, it was a suicide. If you look any further, you won't have a career, and he wouldn't give up. He's like, no, I know that you guys are doing shady stuff. And they're like, all right, you went too far. You didn't find anything. Basically messed with the wrong people. Say goodbye to your career. He's definitely someone who is questioning this kind of conservative old guard, so...
Now let me move on to something else. What did you think of 5? Did you feel like she was... Because I know, at first I too was kind of like, this is a little over the top. Like, I felt as though the show had a real it felt a little grounded, and then she showed up and it was a little
I almost feel
crazy.
Like it jumped 1 foot into almost Death Note territory because she's like a super genius and she's battling the other super geniuses and
she's like doing like the craziest stuff and she's very unhinged.
They needed some kind of wild card element in that because the story needed to get the 11 episodes, it needed something else, some added factor to make it go in. And it wasn't like she wasn't planned. I mean, she was set up from the beginning. So it wasn't like he was like, oh, I didn't realize this was going to have to go on so long. Better throw in a random twist. So I understand why she was there. I think she could have been done better, but she didn't ruin it for me. I think she could have been dialed back from 11 to about 8. And I think she would have been a lot less jarring.
Although I did end up liking, kind of in the end, how it worked out. And also that she does all of these things and then they sort of get blamed for them. And in the end, they're still not blameless for that stuff. So I liked that sort of ending up on them. There's also that Lisa is the other character that people could take or leave. I thought that she was going to be a lot more important to... And she wasn't not important. I think she's very emotionally important. I just thought that she was going to be much more of a central... Yeah, like much more of a central figure in this sort of battle. And I mean, she is peripherally, and obviously she's very important to 12. But again, more like, I feel like it's more to the side, and I thought she was going to like really come and be... For lack of a better word, I thought she was also going to be a terrorist. Like, that she hated her school and hated society, and, like, I thought she was going to be a darker character than she ended up being.
I wonder how much they just pulled back on her. But that's, like, a question for, like, an interview more than anything. I think that after a while, they just settled on her being an emotional focus, for better and for worse. I do kind of wonder... how much, if she was removed and they just had a little more 9-12 interaction, how much she could have been written out. But I feel like 9 and 12 kind of sync so much, it would be weird for them to have certain conversations that only kind of pop up with Lisa.
And there's like that kind of break between them, and she's very important to that. And that 12 kind of makes a connection, whereas I think a lot of the show is about being sort of nameless, unimportant. You know, they don't have names. They weren't given names, basically. Obviously they use fake names and such, but that he makes like a connection to a person, and that like you won't be forgotten, that sort of idea, I think is kind of important, especially in the end.
Yeah, she is kind of important for the thematic ending, I suppose, yeah. Theoretically, you could also write in Shibuzaki a little more that way. His kind of connection to them is so much more Lupin, Zenigata.
That is too funny to use in like as a comparison.
I mean,
like that's too goofy.
You get what I'm going for.
I know what you're trying to say. It's just so like the worst example.
I was trying to think of like people who are really against each other, but then also have a certain mutual respect. That kind of dynamic. That like, but Lisa kind of connected with them as people, not as like on this almost professional level.
Well, this was a show that I was very impressed by the first episode. I think I had an emotional reaction, as a lot of people did, to the subject matter, and I think that it delivered all the way through, and had some surprises along the way.
This is kind of one of those series that people kind of go back to, and if nothing else, I feel like it opens the door to a certain amount of conversation about stuff. It basically gives permission to talk about a lot of stuff on a serious level in anime. Like, look, they did it and it went over well, and nobody, there wasn't riots in the streets. If we do things sensitively, we can explore these ideas.
And it does seem like a show that warrants rewatching to look for more of the these deeper themes that are that seem to be present at the end. You know, it seems like a series that will maybe get better with rewatchings to be able to pick up even more of it. I recommend it. If I finished it, I'm pretty much recommending it, so I should just not bother even saying.
Well, I hope that this series does well. If for nothing else, I want to see Watanabe do other stuff.
More original stuff.
Hopefully, it won't be another several years before he gets to do another original project. I'm pretty sure if MAPPA has anything to say about it, this won't be the last. Alright, see you guys next time.